The Whale's Song by Diane Sheldon. Lily's grandmother told her a story. Once upon a time, she said, the ocean was filled with whales. They were as big as the hills. They were as peaceful as the moon. They were the most wondrous creatures you could ever imagine. Lily climbed onto her grandmother's lap. I used to sit at the end of the pier and listen for whales, said Lily's grandmother. Sometimes I'd sit there all day and all night. Then suddenly I'd see them coming toward me from miles away. They moved through the water as if they were dancing. But why did they swim to you, Grandma? Asked Lily. How did they know you were there? Lily's grandmother smiled. Oh, you had to bring them something special. A perfect shell, or a beautiful stone. And if they liked you, the whales would take your gift and give you something in return. What would they give you, Grandma? Asked Lily. What did you get from the whales? Lily's grandmother sighed. Once or twice, she whispered. Once or twice, I heard them sing. Lily's great-uncle Frederick stomped into the room. That's nothing but a silly old tale, he snapped. Whales were important for their meat, and for their bones, and for their blubber. If you have to tell Lily about whales, then tell her something useful. Don't fill her head with nonsense. Singing whales, indeed. There were whales here millions of years before there were ships, or cities, or even cave dwellers, continued Lily's grandmother. People used to say they were magical. People used to eat them and boil them down for oil, grumbled Lily's great-uncle Frederick, and he stomped back out of the room. Lily dreamt about whales. In her dreams, she saw them, as large as mountains and bluer than the sky. In her dreams, she heard them singing, their voices like the wind. In her dreams, they leapt from the water and called her name. In the morning, Lily went down to the ocean, to the place where no one fished or swam or sailed. She walked to the end of the old pier. The water was empty and still. She took a yellow flower out of her pocket and dropped it in the water. "This is for you," she called into the air. Lily sat at the end of the pier and waited. She waited all morning and all afternoon. Then, as dusk began to fall, Uncle Frederick came down the hill after her. "Enough of this foolishness," he said. "Come on home. You can't be dreaming your life away." That night, Lily awoke suddenly. The room was bright with moonlight. She sat up and listened. The house was quiet. Lily climbed out of bed and went to the window. She could hear something in the distance, on the far side of the hill. She raced outside and down to the shore. Her heart was pounding as she reached the sea. There, enormous in the ocean, were the whales. They leapt and jumped and spun across the moon. Their singing filled the night. Lily saw her yellow flower dancing on the spray. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Suddenly, Lily felt the breeze rustle her nightgown and the cold nip at her toes. She shivered and rubbed her eyes. Then it seemed the ocean was still again, and the night dark and silent. Lily thought she must have been dreaming. She stood up and turned toward home. Then, from far, far away, on the breath of the wind, she heard. The whales were calling her name. Jonah and the Whale, adapted by Derek Webb. It was a glorious day, and Jonah felt very happy with himself. There was a light breeze and a cloudless sky, the perfect weather for doing not much in particular, he thought. He was just settling down to enjoy a quiet snooze when he was awoken by a voice. He looked up and immediately realized whose voice it was. Jonah, you see, was a prophet who lived in Israel many, many centuries ago. And the voice he'd heard was the voice of God.
Jonah, there is something I want you to do. I want you to go to Nineveh and preach to the people there. You must tell them they must mend their wicked ways, or I shall have to punish them.
Now it has to be said, the last place Jonah wanted to go to was Nineveh. It had a terrible reputation, and he was really quite afraid for his safety. Nineveh was a great city on the river Tigris, and the capital of Assyria, which was the sworn enemy of Israel. The people there were well known for being very violent and always causing trouble. Nevertheless, Jonah got up as instructed. But, far from making his way to Nineveh, he decided to escape to Spain instead, which was in completely the opposite direction. That way, he thought, he would be out of God's sight, and he could avoid doing what was asked of him. Spain was way across the Great Sea, and to get there, Jonah had to get a boat from the nearest port, which was a place called Joppa. There was a great deal of hustle and bustle at the harbour the day Jonah arrived. Ships were being loaded and unloaded, and everyone seemed to be busy doing something. Jonah walked up and down, not knowing what type of ship he was really looking for. Finally, he saw one that seemed to be about to set sail. Are you going to Spain? Jonah called out to the captain. We are indeed, came the reply. Then have you room for one more? Asked Jonah, as he ran sprightly up the gangplank. Well, I expect we could fit you in, said the captain, twisting the end of his beard. But then a thought crossed his mind. You do have enough money for the passage, I take it? I most certainly do, replied Jonah, pulling out a handful of coins. Well, welcome on board, smiled the captain. We'll soon find you somewhere to sleep. It turned out that the place the captain had in mind was the hold, along with all the cargo. But Jonah didn't mind. After all, he would soon be miles away, and in any case, the goods in the hold were soft and made a nice, comfortable bed. But no sooner did the ship reach open sea than the sky began to grow ominously dark, and large storm clouds began gathering. It looks like we're in for a bit of rough weather, said the captain to one of the crew. Make sure everyone's at their station. A bit of rough weather was the understatement of the year. They'd hardly travelled any distance at all when the storm broke, and what a storm it was. Neither the captain nor any of the crew had ever experienced anything like it. The fury and speed with which it hit the ship took their breath away. The crew pulled down the sails as quickly as they could, but too late to save some, which were ripped to shreds in the ferocious winds. The ship was spun around and lost all direction. Timbers groaned and creaked under the strain. Wind screeched through torn sails. The terrible booming of thunder threatened to burst their eardrums, while their eyes were seared by brilliance as deadly tongues of lightning licked the sky. Unrelenting rain and waves lashed the ship, ripping away huge planks of timber and tossing them into the raging sea below as if they were matchsticks. Several members of the crew actually had to tie themselves to the ship to prevent being washed over the side. Others threw everything they could overboard to lighten the load, and the captain sent some sailors down into the hold to bring up any cargo that could be got rid of. That's when they saw Jonah. He was curled up in a nest made from some sacks of grain. All the while the great storm had been raging overhead, he'd been sleeping. Believing him to be somehow the cause of their trouble, the sailors woke him rudely and brought him up on deck. Who has brought this misfortune on us? Cried the captain above the roar of the wind. It's my fault, Jonah called back. I have brought the anger of God on your ship by trying to escape from doing what was asked of me. Then you must pray to God and beg his forgiveness. Who knows? He may yet take pity on us and let us live. It will be no use, cried Jonah. But what can be done? Asked the captain. Are we all to die in this storm? My ship cannot take such a battering as this for much longer. There is only one thing to do, said Jonah emphatically. Throw me overboard. The captain and crew were astonished. How could they? Throw a man overboard to his certain death? It was totally unthinkable. There was just one hope left. They took to the oars and pulled bravely against the sea to try and make land. But it was no good. They didn't have the strength to fight the mountainous waves, and the storm was getting worse by the minute. At last, they were forced to give up and accept their fate. There's nothing else for it, insisted Jonah. You must throw me into the water now, or your ship will be lost. They knew what Jonah said was true, and they had no alternative if they were to save the lives of everyone else on board. So they took Jonah and threw him to the waiting sea below. And as they did so, they prayed that they would not be blamed for the death of an innocent man. Then, an incredible thing happened. The second that Jonah hit the water, the waves subsided, the wind dropped, and the sky grew bright again. It was as if the storm had never happened. The crew of the ship, needless to say, were in complete awe. They stared, open-mouthed, at the now completely calm sea, and marvelled at the power of God, which they had experienced firsthand. Meanwhile, something equally extraordinary was happening to Jonah. Instead of being drowned, as he expected, he found himself floating helplessly in a wave that was rushing along like the water in a rapids. Then it felt as if it was pouring over a waterfall. Down, down, down he went, his arms and legs flailing everywhere. He had no idea what was happening to him. There was a tremendous roar of water in his ears, and he could see nothing at all. He had never been so frightened in his life before. And then, suddenly, all was still. He had landed in what appeared to be a large cave. He tried to stand up, but fell down immediately. Wherever he was, it was horribly slippery, and there was a disgusting smell about the place. "Oh, where am I? Oh, what has become of me now?" His voice boomed back as the echo bounced off the walls all around him. Then, very gradually, his eyes became used to the dim light, and, with horror, he realized where he actually was. He was in the stomach of a whale. It couldn't be possible. He had been swallowed. Blind panic overtook him for a few minutes. He struggled to his feet and screamed until he was completely out of breath. Then he slid back down on the fleshy mounds beneath him and sobbed. Now what was he to do? It was only because he tried to avoid doing what God asked that he'd got himself in this situation. "Oh, forgive me, Lord," he cried, and then he prayed and prayed for hours on end that he might be spared a slow death in the whale's stomach. For 3 days Jonah was like a prisoner. There was no way he could escape. He was trapped. The fetid heat was suffocating, and he gasped for air. What was even worse was that every now and then the whale would open its huge jaws and suck in gallons of seawater and fish. After a while, as you can imagine, the smell became unbearable. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, God answered his prayers. The whale was swimming quite close to shore when, without warning, it spat Jonah out. Jonah could hardly believe his good fortune. There he was, within easy reach of a sandy beach, with the sun shining overhead. He swam and swam, splashing around in the clear blue waters, so glad to be out of the whale at last. He dived under the water, cleaning himself as much as he could, and then gulped in lungfuls of clean, fresh air. How good it felt to be alive! "Oh, Lord, thank you," he called. "Thank you." And this time, when God told him to go to Nineveh, Jonah was so grateful he set off immediately. The beach Jonah had landed on was not far from where he had originally set out in the ship, but a long way from Nineveh, so he had a good few days' solid walking in front of him. For hour after hour, Jonah strode along the stony road, stopping only to drink some water and wipe the sweat from his forehead. Tired though he was, he kept on walking, until finally the great city of Nineveh appeared on the horizon. As he got closer, it grew larger and larger, until all he could see was the walls of the city rising up in front of him. The sun glinted on the tiles of roofs, and the sound of thousands of people and animals reached his ears. He knew Nineveh was Assyria's capital, but this was much bigger than he ever expected. That's when he began to feel terribly nervous. These were the enemies of Israel, and here he was, Jonah, walking straight in amongst them. Was he mad? He could be killed. It was just like walking into a lion's den. Then he thought again. He was here at God's bidding. It was only because of God that he was alive at all. He could have still been inside the whale. With that, Jonah steeled himself to complete the task God had set him. He felt strong and confident as he strode towards the gates of Nineveh. When he was within shouting distance of its walls, he began crying out God's message. "This wicked city of yours will be overthrown. For your sins, God will raise your houses to the ground. Nothing will be left but bricks and rubble. 40 days, that's all the time you have left." He went up and down the streets, proclaiming the message. Anywhere there was a gathering of people, he preached. The reaction to Jonah's prophecy was astonishing. Against all expectations, the people of Nineveh listened to what he was saying. They didn't become angry or laugh at him. As he spoke, a hush fell over them. They quietly stood and heard what he had to say, and then walked slowly away with their eyes to the ground. It was as if they knew they had been sinful and fully expected to be punished. But more than that, they paid heed to Jonah's words. To a person, they began renouncing their wicked ways and promising to be good. Rich and poor alike started wearing coarse sackcloth instead of the fine clothes they used to wear. They were, it seemed, determined to show their faith in God. Even the king of Nineveh himself changed his ways. When he heard the prophecy, he tore off his royal robe and put on a rough sackcloth garment, like everyone else. Then he sat down humbly in the dust in the middle of the street and commanded all the people to fast. No food was to be eaten, no water to be drunk. Only sackcloth was to be worn from now on, and all the people of Nineveh must pray to God, beg his forgiveness, and repent their sinful lives. Nobody could have been more surprised than Jonah that his prophecy had had such an effect. He'd been fully expecting to be attacked or even murdered by these people, and instead, here they all were, praying to God. For his part, God was very pleased at what he saw. The people of Nineveh were obviously intent on changing their ways and living their lives well in future. No longer would they be the feared and dreadful enemy that they once were. God decided, therefore, not to punish them after all, but to show them mercy and spare them. Now this absolutely infuriated Jonah. Why had God let them off so lightly, he thought? It wasn't fair. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. If this doesn't show I was right to set off for Spain in the first place, I'll be known as a false prophet if I'm not careful, making predictions that don't come true. I might have known from the start that you would pardon them. What was the point of me going? What a waste of time!
"Why are you so angry, Jonah?"
God replied.
"You have no reason."
At this, Jonah said nothing. He simply sulked. He left the city that day and set off back home. Tired and miserable and hot, he tramped the dusty road until he was too exhausted to go any further. He sat down by the roadside and waited to see if something would happen to Nineveh after all. As he watched, people went about their business without, it seemed, a care in the world. He could hear the sound of them praying in the distance, but, strain his eyes and ears as he did, there was no hint of any great tempest on its way to destroy Nineveh. Eventually, Jonah accepted that God wasn't going to do anything to Nineveh. That made him more miserable still. It was a very hot day, too, which didn't help. The sun beat down on him, and he felt himself getting more and more irritable the hotter he got. After a while, the heat started to become intolerable, and Jonah knew he'd be burnt if he didn't find shelter soon. He looked round in despair. But then, to his amazement, a tree began to grow right in the ground beside him. Higher and higher it grew, until it was way above Jonah's head, giving him all the shade and shelter he needed. Jonah knew it was God who made the tree, and he was very grateful. He was so tired, he settled down and rested. Then, as the sun sank, he fell asleep. Jonah spent a comfortable night under that tree, his first good night's sleep, for many a day, in fact. But the next morning, God sent worms to eat at the tree's roots and kill it. Not only that, he sent a terrific gust of wind to blow the tree over. At this, Jonah became doubly angry. There was the tree that had protected him all night, destroyed in an instant. And for what?
Listen to me, Jonah,
said God gently.
How can you be so angry at the loss of a tree that you didn't plant, didn't look after, and cost you nothing? A tree that grows in the night and dies in a day. You think I should spare the tree, but not a great city, with 120,000 people in it? Is that what you think, Jonah? Is your pride so hurt that you cannot see that it is far better to forgive and save, rather than punish and destroy?
Jonah bowed his head in shame. He knew God was right. Then he looked up and smiled. He had swallowed his pride and his anger, just like the whale had swallowed him. How the Whale Got Its Throat by Rudyard Kipling. In the sea, once upon a time, oh my best beloved, there was a whale, and he ate fishies. He ate the starfish and the garfish, and the crab and the dab and the plaice and the dace and the skate and his mate, and the mackerel and the pickerel, and the really truly twirly-whirly eel. All the fishies he could find in all the sea, he ate with his mouth, so. Till at last there was only one small fish left in all the sea, and he was a small 'stute fish, and he swam a little behind the whale's right ear, so as to be out of harm's way. Then the whale stood up on his tail and said, "I'm hungry." And the small 'stute fish said in a small 'stute voice, "Noble and generous cetacean, have you ever tasted man?" "No," said the whale. "What is it like?" "Nice," said the small 'stute fish. "Nice, but nubbly." "Then fetch me some," said the whale, and he made the sea froth up with his tail. "One at a time is enough," said the 'stute fish. "If you swim to latitude 50 north, longitude 40 west, that is magic, you will find, sitting on a raft in the middle of the sea, with nothing on but a pair of blue canvas breeches, a pair of suspenders, you must not forget the suspenders, best beloved, and a jackknife, one shipwrecked mariner, who, it is only fair to tell you, is a man of infinite resource and sagacity. So the whale swam and swam to latitude 50 north, longitude 40 west, as fast as he could swim, and on a raft in the middle of the sea, with nothing to wear except a pair of blue canvas breeches, a pair of suspenders, you must particularly remember the suspenders, best beloved, and a jackknife, he found one single solitary shipwrecked mariner, trailing his toes in the water. He had his mummy's leave to paddle, or else he would never have done it, because he was a man of infinite resource and sagacity. Then the whale opened his mouth, back and back and back, till it nearly touched his tail, and he swallowed the shipwrecked mariner, and the raft he was sitting on, and his blue canvas breeches, and the suspenders, which you must not forget, and the jackknife. He swallowed them all down into his warm, dark, inside cupboards, and then he smacked his lips, so, and turned round 3 times on his tail. But as soon as the mariner, who was a man of infinite resource and sagacity, found himself truly inside the whale's warm, dark, inside cupboards, he stumped and he jumped, and he thumped and he bumped, and he pranced and he danced, and he banged and he clanged, and he hit and he bit, and he leaped and he creeped, and he prowled and he howled, and he hopped and he dropped, and he cried and he sighed, and he crawled and he bowled, and he stepped and he leapt, and he danced hornpipes where he shouldn't. And the whale felt most unhappy indeed. Have you forgotten the suspenders? So he said to the 'stute fish, "This man is very nubbly, and besides, he's making me hiccup. What shall I do?" "Tell him to come out," said the 'stute fish. So the whale called down his own throat to the shipwrecked mariner. "Come out and behave yourself. I've got the hiccups." "Nay, nay," said the mariner. "Not so, but far otherwise. Take me to my natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion, and I'll think about it." And he began to dance more than ever. "You'd better take him home," said the 'stute fish to the whale. "I ought to have warned you that he is a man of infinite resource and sagacity." So the whale swam and swam and swam, with both flippers and his tail, as hard as he could for the hiccups. And at last he saw the mariner's natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion, and he rushed halfway up the beach and opened his mouth wide and wide and wide and said, "Change here for Winchester, Ashalot, Nashua, Keene, and stations on the Fitchburg Road." And just as he said Fitch, the mariner walked out of his mouth. But while the whale had been swimming, the mariner, who was indeed a person of infinite resource and sagacity, had taken his jackknife and cut up the raft into a little square grating, all running crisscross, and he had tied it firm with his suspenders. Now you know why you are not to forget the suspenders. And he dragged that grating good and tight into the whale's throat, and there it stuck. Then he recited the following sloka, which, as you have not heard it, I will now proceed to relate. "By means of a grating, I have stopped your eating." For the mariner, he was also an Hibernian, and he stepped out on the shingle and went home to his mother, who'd given him leave to trail his toes in the water. And he married, and lived happily ever afterward. So did the whale. But from that day on, the grating in his throat, which he could neither cough up nor swallow down, prevented him eating anything except very, very small fish. And that is the reason why whales nowadays never eat men or boys or little girls. The small 'stute fish went and hid himself in the mud under the doorsills of the equator. He was afraid that the whale might be angry with him. The sailor took the jackknife home. He was wearing the blue canvas breeches when he walked out on the shingle. The suspenders were left behind, you see, to tie the grating with. And that is the end of that tale.